You think you like Spice Girls? Nice and bright?
No, not
You know,
at
I don't
all.
ever hear it.
After that?
Yep.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, good morning.
Today we're talking about the VA privatization, possibilities, mergers, whatever. It's a lot of stuff. Today's going to be a relatively short. Could not find a lot of information about the actual pros and cons, the actual policies we introduced. But there is, at the end of this, I got a slide for discussion. But right before that is a little video slide that I want to make sure I get to that video slide.
Does that sound?
It does.
Okay.
I forgot to tell you about
No,
that. But to start off with, as always, we're going to take a look at what the privatization is and what that actually means. And this comes from a Paul Starr, a Yale Law and Policy Review from 1988. Privatization is any shift of activities or functions from the state to the private sector, any shift of production of goods and services from public to private. So basically, instead of the government providing it, the government employing people to do it, it goes to private companies, and then they get paid by the government, but it's no longer government employees operating it. So that is the move that so I don't trip. That's the definition of going private with the VA, and so let's jump into it here. The cons of going private. So this is where I got very little information. Most of the pros and cons I found, websites I found, listed the exact same pros and cons, just with a little bit different wording. So, starting out here, we're going to start with cons, even though the article did the other way. I like to go in alphabetical order. So the potential cost increases. Now, right now, VA and veterans that go to VA and everything, all that is paid for by taxes. And there's some out of pocket for the veterans, but for the most part, everything, all the services they get, the surgeries, the medicines, a lot of that is paid for from taxes. Now, if it goes private, there is that potential that the price will increase. Now, it's still going to be paid by taxes, but if the medical provider, they have a higher cost than what the government provided one would be, it is a potential increase in the price. The other con is the loss of specialized care. A lot of veterans require very specialized care, especially those that are combat veterans. They have PTSD or some other. The one that was actually mentioned in the article is the head traumas. Too close to an IED going off, so they got to make a head trauma that you're not going to find specialized care for in the private sector. It's not as good as it could be from the VA. So those are the potential cons of going private. Now the pros, this is the weird part, potentially cost increase, but potential cost decrease. Now, because we're going with the private sector, in certain areas, there are a lot of doctors competing with each other, so they have to get their prices in competitive areas. So in those denser areas where you have that many doctors competing with each other, you could run into cheaper prices for the services than otherwise. Shorter wait times. Right now, if I wanted to go to VA for something, I have to go up to Anderson. Now, if I need to go for something a little more intense, I have to go all the way down to Columbia. And my dad, he'll probably kill me for saying this, but he's been dealing with some medical issues lately, and he's had to travel down to Columbia beforehand. Now, a little bit of privatization has been happening, and he's been able to go to other doctors for some of his work and be able to stay closer, that's one of the pros. If it does go private, or at least partially private, some things they can actually go to local doctors for instead of having to travel all the way down to Columbia or to their nearest VA clinic. Now, and the availability of the VA medical centers, like right now, here in this area, we have a clinic in Anderson, but the hospital itself is in Columbia. Now they're working on building another hospital here locally, but if it stays with the government, they're going to have to increase their infrastructure to build more medical centers and clinics around the area. Whereas if it goes public, there's already hospitals and other doctors' offices everywhere if they accept the VA insurance. As it were, VA is kind of insurance for veterans in a way. So the pros of going private would be they have access to that. Like I said, not a lot of information on those. There's no studies or statistics right now that actually says one way is better than the other. There's the potential pros, there's the potential cons. There's no solid facts yet. So I have no other information to give you on that aside from here's the potentials. So we'll jump into.
Where does the excuse me?
Yep.
We probably didn't go to the bottom of my question, but anyway, specialized care. You say possible loss of that. Why?
Because
I mean, there are neurosurgeons and neuro and
yeah, you would think that
psychiatrists
if
and all
the
that.
specialized doctors are not being paid by the government anymore, they could go to one of the private hospitals and work
Yeah.
there.
Mhm.
So let me just read you the part
Yeah.
right here from
Yeah.
the article.
That's what I was just trying to figure that out.
VA doctors are trained to cater to the unique health needs that veterans share. In fact, this is one of the main reasons the VA was created. 1/3 of veterans are diagnosed with at least one mental health disorder, and the VA excels in caring for these veterans. The VA was rated higher than the private sector by more than 30% in treating mental health disorders in veterans. VA doctors also specialize in burns, spinal trauma, and prosthetics, which are rare in civilian life. If veterans are moved to purely private care, they would lose the benefit of seeing physicians who are experts in caring for veterans. Veterans care is just as important of an issue as it is a complicated one. That has nothing to do with the loss of the
Okay.
They didn't put it, they got subtitles and everything, they didn't put one there. That was their conclusion.
Okay. How
So-
about continuity of care? Is it ever?
Yeah.
If you got a family practice like that, you've got one doctor kind of responsible for overseeing your total, whether it's mental or a stubbed toe or a broken wrist or whatever they force it. Do you get to see the same doctor if you go to Columbia, for instance?
Yes.
Or even Dallas?
Yes. If depending on what it is that you got going on. My dad, he's had one doctor who's been in charge of his case
Okay.
the entire time.
I didn't.
He doesn't
wasn't aware
always
of
see that doctor when he goes down there, though.
that. Yeah.
And then when he gets to go up to the clinic here in Anderson just for checkups, it's always a different doctor.
Yeah,
And
different.
he actually even had one instance where the doctor came in, called him the wrong name, had the wrong chart, and everything. Had never even looked at that chart.
Well, isn't there a VA place in Greenville?
Or what?
I think there is, yeah.
What
So
is that, a
you're in
VA? They closed the one in Greenville.
Yeah, the one in Greenville.
It's on Grove
Road.
Did it
On
close?
Grove Road?
Oh, it's on Grove Road now, that's right,
Oh,
I'm
they
sorry.
moved it.
They
moved
It's
it.
the one in
Good.
Black Hawk
I'm sorry.
Dozen.
One thing we have, I
I'll
cannot
just
choose
be
to
quiet
go
the
to
rest
Greenville.
of the time.
If I've been assigned to Anderson, I cannot go to Greenville for anything.
So you can't cross county lines?
The only reason they would send me down to Columbia, or the reason they send my dad down to Columbia, is because they have the specialized care that they can't cover at Anderson. If they had that specialized care in Greenville, then they'd probably send them to Greenville
Because
instead of
Columbia
Columbia.
is the only one that has a hospital.
Yeah, Columbia is the one. I've actually been down to the one in Columbia, and there's also one in Charleston, not quite as big, but the Columbia one is like,
In Augusta, Georgia, there's one. A lot of veterans in this area go to,
yeah,
and Asheville, I think, has one as well.
yeah.
But those are
There's a
out of
few
state.
around, yeah, but a lot of them are out of state. Some guys, when my dad was working in, and I was living in Charleston, my dad was staying in a camper at a campground there to do, he was their safety consultant. And one of his neighbors at the campground was a veteran who was camping at the campground because he didn't live close enough to the hospital that provided the care he needed. So he had to camp there so he could just make his trips. Otherwise, he'd be traveling every other day to go back for his treatments and coming from out of state. Because I don't remember which state he was from, but the state he was in, the VA hospital there, did not have the treatments that he needed. Only the one in Charleston.
So the state still has oversight, it sounds like.
Not necessarily the
It's
state,
federal.
it's federal.
I understand that, but you're saying you can't decide as a citizen to go to this hospital even if
Oh.
there's one closer.
Yeah.
Because you have to cross over state lines, so that sounds like state has some sort of influence.
Well, you have to cross over, and it's not necessarily because of the state line or things, because of what the hospital has.
Oh.
So, like radiation treatment, that's here in South Carolina. As far as I know, only Columbia and Charleston's going to have that available. So any veteran that has cancer issues is going to have to go to Columbia or Charleston, and it's going to be up to the VA which one they go to. So that, my dad fought because they were going to send them to Charleston. She was like, well, Columbia's got it. I'm closer to Columbia. So he fought for a little while and was able to get that. But he couldn't just like, man, I just want to go to Columbia instead. They wanted to take them all the way down to Charleston.
And federal programs definitely have borders. So with the food bank ministry, we're technically, the USDA is only supposed to go to Anderson County, even though it's a federal program. It's allotted by county. So if someone comes from all the way in Greenville County, which is not that far, we have to say, I'm sorry, we can't help you with USDA food. Even though we might be the closest food bank. But it's because it's allotted in that way, and even though it's a federal program, so similar sort of thing, some bureaucracy.
So there's a lot of it. The VA structure right now it's broken, quite honestly, but at the same time I see the specialized needs that we would lose because those doctors won't all go to the same place. So right now the VA kind of has they're all here. They're in that one spot that they can go to for all that specialized treatment. And if they were not employed there, they may not be in that one spot. They may spread out, and it still may be hard to find a place. You can still go up to your local doctor and get a reference to another hospital somewhere else. That's another 2 hours drive because that's where the specialist is. It's not quite as bad as having to drive
But your
3
insurance
hours.
might not.
Pardon?
But your insurance might not.
Yeah. So.
Out network.
Yeah, I hate out of network. It's a terrible thing. But it's a complicated issue, and like I said, I don't know which going private has its benefits. Going staying with the government has its benefits, and maybe the best option is somewhere middle road.
Is there another example of, I'm thinking about road building?
Well, look at Medicare.
Well, that's true. too.
You know what, you see what, if you have somebody that's on Medicare, you see what they pay for some medical equipment and things, it's astronomical sometimes, the amount of money.
I can't think of any other real good examples. Like I said, I can't go into too much detail about my dad said, but he's dealt with both the light and the dark side of the VA at this point. And it's been one crazy roller coaster. And I will eventually have to do it because it's going to be a nightmare. It really is if the VA stays in its current state.
The tough thing is that by the time you need that specialized care, you're
You need
almost too sick to get
Yeah.
to the places you need to get the help for. We've had uncle on Eric's side of the family that, it was impossible. And he ended up dying, is basically what happened, because he really couldn't get to the care he needed,
Yeah.
especially by himself. He was unable to drive.
Yeah.
Well, I have a friend whose husband was in a work accident. He suffered brain trauma, brain injury. And the VA, they were able, because he was a veteran, they were able to get him hooked up with that, and they did wonders over and above what the private sector could have done for him.
And that's one thing my dad has said a lot when he actually gets in there and gets with the regular doctor who's dealing with his particular case on a regular basis, and the nurses. It's great. He loves the people. They get along just fine, and they do their job really well. It's just bureaucracy part of it about getting to that point
The whole
is,
healthcare system is broken
Yeah.
in this country.
yeah,
Another thing is, they don't know, dealing with my dad was a veteran,
Mhm.
and we were in the dark about what he could get
yeah,
until he was old,
Mhm.
and was good.
that's, unfortunately, that's what they do, they love to hide.
You have a
information.
VA
You got it.
office that's supposed to tell you what you're entitled to.
Yeah.
The VA office here didn't tell us half the stuff we could have applied for.
Yeah.
And, cause he was legally blind, and it was just awful. But you gotta have somebody that's gonna kinda challenge you where you
Yeah.
need to go.
You do.
Advocate.
Even
Yeah.
though he went to the VA, finally, we got him in where he could see somebody in the VA. But it was a long road of politics.
Yeah, lots of red tape.
All right. So let's go and take a look at what now that again the Bible doesn't have anything that says help the veterans. It doesn't say. So this is another scenario where we need to look at what is the circumstance that they're in and find similar circumstances within the Bible to give us a guide on how we're supposed to help people that are in those circumstances. So the first one I have is Proverbs 31, 8 through 9. Open thy mouth for the dumb and the cause of all such as are appointed to destruction. Open thy mouth, judge righteously, and plead the cause of the poor and the needy. So I interpret this, and this is my interpretation. You can have your own interpretation. I'm not telling you this is absolutely right. I'm not a Bible scholar. For me, what that means is those that are in need, we have to help them as much as we can. If they can't speak for themselves or they can't help defend themselves, then we are supposed to do that for them. In this particular case of politics and voting on different things, we have a voice there with our vote. So we can vote for things that's going to help the people. And in this particular case, like I said, I can't tell you which way is the right way or not. But vote for whichever way you think is going to help them the most. I feel like Proverbs 31 there kind of gives us that directive. The next one is Proverbs 3:27 through 28. Withhold not good from them to whom it is due, when it is in the power of thine hand to do it. Say not unto thy neighbor, go and come again, and tomorrow I will give, when thou hast it by thee.
I like that one because don't hold from those that are due,
Yeah.
and those who have served are due.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of my father's favorite quote was, "Whatever thy hand findeth to do, do it with thy might." That's basically a same sort of thing.
Yeah. So this one is, I was going to go down the same road there. So, the veterans, anybody that has served, they have. Now, I do not include myself in this because I think most veterans who are veterans would not include themselves. I always look up to the veterans who've gone before me. My dad, he's the reason I joined the Marine. And all the men and women that have served before me, they deserve. They put their lives on the line. Whether or not they went and saw combat or not, they signed on that dotted line and said, I'm giving the government, I'm giving the United States a blank check that includes up to and including my life. And when they come back and they're suffering from whatever they're suffering from, they deserve to get all our support as much as we can give them.
Especially now that we're in a 100-year war, and they're going back and forth and back and forth. They never recuperate from one time over there before they're sent back again.
Yeah. And it's also very hard, those that do get out. I watch a lot of podcasts by former military, Army, Marine Corps, a lot of those guys, and the things that they talk about, a lot of them that did see combat, they're used to having a camaraderie, a brotherhood that they're in. And when they get back into civilian life, they don't have that. Now, I was going to do, I forget the reference now because I took it out. I was going to go with the widow verse where we're supposed to take care of
Widows and orphans.
widows and orphans. Yeah. And one of the things in there said, help them if they have family to help them. The family needs to help them first, and then the church helps them. And I think I could actually adapt that a little bit. Some of these veterans, while they come back, they got family. Their family is not equipped to help them with the things that they're going through. And so, while maybe the church itself is not necessarily equipped to help them either, the church does have the church members has a vote that can help them. So if there is legislation that comes up that is, this is something that will help particular veterans in a particular situation where they need the help, then voting for that is the way we give our help, and as we're directed. So, like I said, very short today. I want to show you this video, and then we'll go into discussion. Okay, yeah, I forgot. I don't know if we'll get copyrighted or anything on this.
Okay.
So I wanted to make sure I get this in there, and I do want to put that link in the description later on.
Okay.
So this video is from NPR, and it's making sense of veteran suicide.
Suicide among veterans is 22% higher than for people who never served in the military. It's not the obvious reason you'd think. The rates of suicide are just as high among vets who never deployed to a war or saw combat. But it's a really complex thing to study because suicide remains a pretty rare event, and you can't ever ask someone who has actually taken their own life about the reasons. According to the VA's most recent data, that 22% stat is veterans compared to people who have never served. Breaking that number down into male and female veterans highlights a shocking statistic. Male veterans kill themselves at a rate 19% higher than civilian men. Female veterans die by suicide at a rate 150% higher than civilian women. Pretty clearly because veteran women are so much more likely to own and know how to handle firearms than civilian women. It's worth highlighting the high suicide rate among male vets is also connected to gun use, since guns are much more often fatal than pills or other methods. But talking about limiting access to guns gets controversial really quick. Some vets have designed their own safeguard, a sort of designated driver for their guns. When they're feeling low, they call a trusted buddy to take their guns out of the house, or give their spouse the key to the gun safe. That prevents a spontaneous, fatal decision in a dark moment. The Department of Veterans Affairs is also taking action. In 2017, they rolled out a futuristic program called ReachVet, which uses predictive analytics to check in on veterans who meet a profile for suicide. The program is making more than 1,000 calls a week. Still, the VA knows that they're not reaching enough veterans. Of the 20 veterans who die by suicide each day, 14 were not getting VA care, which shows that maybe VA care helps, but it needs to be reaching more vets.
I wanted to show that because it's a really important issue. Even now, we're still losing 20 veterans a day to suicide. And so this is one of those policies that whether or not the candidate that you're voting for, it doesn't matter what side of it. This is one of those where I'm going to ask everybody that if the candidate has a good plan for veterans, give that candidate more weight. Let this policy have more weight in your decision of who you're voting for. Because
No, that's fine.
I don't even know, have they even debated Veterans Affairs when they have the big debates? I haven't heard it.
I don't think it's come up in any of the
Well, the
national debates yet.
privatization has.
It has? Okay.
So-
Yeah.
It didn't come up in the last one. I didn't watch the full of the others.
We've been discussing it for a couple of years about broadening the scope, but
Privatization of everything.
it's complicated now.
I wish somebody would post when something is coming up so we could be sure to vote for that particular issue.
I will show a story that kind of dovetails off of this. There's a minister who is now in Foothills Presbytery. You were there when he came in, I think. 9 times out of 10 you
You
were.
were there.
Right.
Presbytery meeting.
Or as a Presbytery. He
Right.
yeah, oh yeah, you know him well actually. He was from John Knox and was a veteran. and he came back and was in a really low place, and he reached out to the suicide hotline because he was at that point, and he left a message and didn't hear anything back. And he reached out to the pastor, and they worked through some things, and he actually was able to turn around and and come to a much different place. And 4 years later, he got a letter from the Veterans Affairs, the suicide hotline of the Navy, I believe it was. And it said, in effect, please don't kill yourself, and if you still feel like this, here's the hotline.
4 years later.
4 years later, yeah. And so because of that, he said, I need to do something else. And so he actually went into training, and he is now ordained as a counselor and works for the Veterans Association up in the hospital in Asheville. And because he feels that that's vitally important. And part of it is he shared that dealing, folks who have been through a combat situation and have taken another human's life, there's a difference. And because he has also been through that, he's able to kind of share that, and there's things that we civilians just do not understand completely. We just wholly cannot understand. And so yeah, I mean, this is huge. Do y'all realize for the last 3 years the national life expectancy has gone down over the last 3 years? The last time that happened was 1915, the Spanish flu epidemic. And the major issue with that is suicides. Not only veteran suicide, but specifically like workers who have been laid off, males in that category. Suicide has actually overtaken car deaths in our nation.
It's something that even in the schools, we've seen the rise in suicidal ideation, attempts, talk, plans. I mean, it's on the rise for just about every category.
Y'all don't realize this is getting out of the veterans, but the depression and the anxiety that our middle school and high schooler and even elementary school
Jolyn, you
kids
had
deal with directly.
Oh, yeah, I did.
And it's so sad, they don't even have a childhood anymore.
How old was he?
He was,
You know, it's kind of
Fifth grade.
shocking when you
Yeah.
think that they're teaching
Fifth
the
grade.
school kids how to control bleeding. And they have these trauma kits, and they're familiarizing the kids with how to do a tourniquet and this kind of thing.
My 5-year-old had to do active shooter training.
Did
and
that
that's just so,
That's,
Well, that's just a sign of the times.
it is.
If you remember
times
way
didn't
back,
go that way.
back in the 50s, whatever, they told kids to get under their desk
For the
I
atomic
remember
because
bombs.
of the
doing
atomic bomb. So, in,
Yeah,
you
but
know,
we
in
only had
reality,
one enemy then.
yeah,
It
but
was
but
Russia.
still, yeah,
Now it's
that's
all
true.
right.
But it's
Yeah.
the situation's the same as always. You know, you have that hanging over you from some era, right or wrong. You know, and this is more complicated and
And the
More
social
often.
media now too is
Yeah.
a
That's a
big
huge part
player
as well.
in the young people.
yeah.
But our veterans, this is a clear issue. Now, how do we deal with that? That's where it gets really complicated. And part of the reason why the VA system is so challenging, PG at least word to use, because different people have different ideas.
Well, there's
And it
more
gets
and more
stuck.
veterans now too,
Right,
and
right.
that are alive. I mean, you know, that because of this war that we're involved in, and have been for almost 20 years. And
Well, and frankly, I think it's like our issues with veterans started with the Vietnam War. Right?
yes, yeah.
The way that we completely,
Or didn't
What?
welcome
The
them
way
back.
we did not welcome them back.
absolutely, yeah, right. My dad, when he came home, they told him to get out of his uniform as quickly as possible and do not act like a Navy man. Do not let anybody know that you just served. and you just come back.
And modern technology is keeping them alive, whereas these injuries would have killed them years ago.
But one thing that we saw from the video, which is really interesting, using AI and algorithms to specifically locate those folks through social media, through all of these various things. Like, there are ways that this can get better because of that technology as well.
Yeah.
But we can say this person is at a high risk for suicide, so let's reach out to them. Let's actually do something. This person maybe has a better support system, and so if we have to, if we have to treat it like a tactical sort of thing, this is a I don't know the right words, what they would be, but like here's a clear target that we need to focus on this person. This person's okay. This one's probably, and if we have to make those tactical decisions, then we should be doing that, and we should be empowering those with those positions to actually do that. There's also work on, it has been instituted, I believe, in veterans thing, a artificial intelligent counseling, someone to talk to basically, and they have found so far that sometimes these veterans are more willing to share with this person who's clearly not a person, right? It's not an actual person, but they can share with someone who's and that can provide much more feedback and updates and that sort of thing. Do you want me to keep
A hotline
Keep
should
going.
be 24 hours a
Doing
day.
do what?
I said a hotline should be 24 hours a day.
Absolutely.
Manned by a human being,
Absolutely.
not a voicemail.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting when they said some veterans are accustomed to having a brotherhood,
Right.
where others, particularly if they do multiple deploys or whatever, may have one or may not have one. And then when they come back, they definitely
They
don't.
definitely don't. They don't have that. And that was what this gentleman who now works in Asheville said was, he's with this group of people that they can form in this counseling sort of group work atmosphere, that band of brothers who have been through similar things, even if they may not have been through the same things together, but they're able to, through the VA, one benefit is you can bring together people who have served, and can help each other deal with some of that stuff. Big topic. Why don't we close in prayer, unless anyone else has anything? Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you for the freedom that we have in this country. Thank you for the men and women who have written a blank check to protect us, to safeguard us and our freedoms. We pray for those who are in leadership positions in the VA and the United States government. We pray that they would be wise and that you would raise up leaders to make some changes, because where things are going are not great. All the politics aside, all of the everything, Lord God, there are 20 people, sisters and brothers in Christ, who are not going to see tomorrow, statistically, because what we have put them through, and because of how we have not helped them. Help us to lay aside all of the other junk. Give us courage and conviction. Show us how we might be involved, how we might be those who reach out how we might be those who speak on behalf of those who are suffering. As those who may be informed and vote and make decisions on behalf of all of us that benefit, even those who are not us, even if we are not veterans. Lord God, be with us in all of our struggles. Thank you for the struggles lifted up today with those who have served and who have not been served by this system. Thank you for those shining moments when they have been. Thank you for the times when the Veterans Association has done well. Help us to grow those times. Lord God, in all of this, we pray that you would do immeasurably more than we could ask or imagine.
You don't know the road map number one, you know the first.
That was blank.
Right.
It was good. It was good. I'll tell you. We didn't have to walk by some. Yeah. When we first went, I was like, oh. He's like, "Look at this little pregnant street." And I was like, yeah, but I didn't really think like I'd have to walk through them to get there.